You're listening to Changing Reality. Changing Reality, where we bend reality all across the world. Only on WQHS Radio. So hi everyone and welcome to another episode of Changing Reality. Welcome one, welcome all to one of our, or at least my favorite show out there, where we get to interview phenomenal people from all walks of life. So if this is your first time watching the show, where have you been so far? And if you're a returning member of the audience, welcome once again. We always enjoy you tuning back in. Changing Reality is a show that, began because I personally felt that there was so much value in listening to the experiences of phenomenal, successful people and uncovering the stories of their journey behind the scenes to where they are today. And hopefully, by sharing these stories among all of us, we'll be able to pick up little nuggets of wisdom to see what we can be doing a little differently and shorten our own learning curves. So, this is a show that, as I said, is held on Penn's WQHS Radio. I am one of your hosts, or your main host, Harsha. Will be interviewing your speakers. And a little bit about me, other than being a student here at the University of Pennsylvania, I'm actually an entrepreneur. I started a social enterprise 8 years ago called Ascendance that today has gone on to work with over 50,000 students, 26 countries, 900 schools and communities, essentially helping at-risk students around the world discover what they love doing, get real-world experiences, and go on to actually start their own social enterprises while they're still in school. And in that process, working with thousands of kids, the most important thing that I noticed and the most important thing that I think has made a difference in their lives and starting their own journeys has been stories. It's been kind individuals who've been willing to take time out of their busy schedules to share what worked for them, what didn't, what they wish they do differently in a sense, and what are the little secrets that, we may not be privy to that we can understand, we can use, and we can adapt. So just like that, stories has changed my life. It's changed the life of so many people around me. And I hope that this show is that same platform for all of you as well. So that you get the stories, the experiences that as you watch, help you learn a little bit more about yourself too. So with that, if there are any specific experiences, topics, questions that you have, please let us know in the comments. Please, reach out to our team and we'd love to see how we can represent the stories that would be the most impactful for all of you watching. So on to today's episode, we have an amazing speaker here today with us. Other than being an alumni at the University of Pennsylvania, he has had an exciting career that I think many Penn students would be envious of in a sense. Starting out as a software engineer at Goldman Sachs, he soon went on to co-found and act as CTO in his own venture, and eventually climbed up the world of tech through various different experiences from some organizations, such as serving as director at Nokia, to today serving as GM and partner of product engineering and AI at Microsoft. So without further ado, let's welcome our phenomenal speaker onto our virtual stage, welcoming Pavandeep to our virtual studio. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. Thank you, Harsha, for having me.
Yes, excited to delve in, So it's the beginning of the semester. I think September is still early enough, right? So you have all the freshmen coming in, everyone excited to get on campus. So to start off today's interview, in a sense, tell us a little bit about your life before Penn. I know you did your bachelor's here at Penn. So what was your life like before that? And how did you even find out about Penn in the first place?
So I was born and raised in New Delhi, India. Finished my high school there, and I started off in college initially at Boston University. So still kind of exploring, where I wanted to go, and that was kind of the first place I landed when I came to the U.S. was BU. And then after about a year, as I understood more of what I wanted to pursue, what areas I wanted to pursue, obviously Penn had just a great reputation for Wharton as well as engineering. And I, joined Penn for that, and was a transfer student actually, not as a freshman coming into Penn, but as a transfer student into the sophomore year.
Oh, wow. Okay. I know lots of transfers. I myself, only got on campus last year. So in my sophomore year. So completely agree with that. Like that start off in a sense. But, when you got to Penn in a sense, they're like any university, I think, but maybe Penn especially, it's a very high-paced environment. There are a lot of different things to do, lots of different things to try. Did you know, okay, you know what, I'm going to go into tech, I'm going to go into, all of these different things that you'd end up doing? Or were you just as, lost and confused as the rest of us? How did you kind of decide what you wanted to try?
I would say I was very confused. So I probably changed my majors quite a few times. I mean, I think I started off as a pre-medical student. Um, really, I didn't had really no clue what I wanted to do. So I started as a pre-medical student, maybe focusing on biomedical engineering was my thought. And I tried that for a while, but I felt like my passion in that space was just not super. Um, and then I tried, going into thinking about other things, and eventually it took me a while for me to kind of land on saying, the thing that I'm passionate about is kind of a mix of technology and entrepreneurship and management, and how to run companies and how to run businesses is kind of where I landed, was the where eventually my interest came in. But it took me a good, I would say, 2 years before I finalized that point of view, I think. And it was really, I think, the end of sophomore year when I felt like, okay, I knew what I wanted to do. So it was certainly a journey I had really, I think I'm probably was more clueless than a lot of the people that I see today. Today it looks like all the students already know what they want to do by the time they hit college. But yeah, I think it was a little bit different my time.
No, and I think it's something that I would beg to differ. I think we're all still, thinking about, where we headed, what's happening in a sense. And I know a lot of people try different things. They do classes, they do clubs, they do like
Yeah.
internships, whatever they can get their hands on in a sense. For you, when you were, in this phase of figuring things out, what was the most, out of your comfort zone thing that you did to try something new?
Journalism. So, like I was saying, I
Wow.
tried. One of the things I did was I actually did an internship first year, freshman year. Um, Again, I was thinking about whether I should go and be pre-medical. I did an internship at in Boston, actually, in Mass General. I didn't like it. I just couldn't stand the sight of blood there. Why don't I try journalism? So I went to and actually did an internship in this TV show in New York, which was called Eye on Asia, and I spent the summer there interviewing a lot of people. Actually, decided journalism wasn't for me either, so that was parked there. And then I, went and did an internship in a financial sector, and just working in technology thing. So it was really the internships, I think, that gave me an understanding of what was really happening in the workplace. And that actually helped finalize my point of view. I think that certainly was one big avenue. I think the second thing was certainly also, as you take more and more classes, you get more mature about the intricacies of the subject. And you kind of start understanding, like, really, is this something you really want to spend the rest of your life doing or not? When I graduated from Penn, um, my formal degree was in was I was a management and technology major, so MNT. So from Wharton I was finance, and from the engineering school was an electrical engineering degree. But to be honest, by the time I graduated, I was taking probably a lot more computer science classes and systems classes and the electrical engineering core, because I already knew it was unlikely that I was going to be a practicing electrical engineer when I get out. So the more you do those classes and the more internships you do, certainly I think your point of view becomes much more pointed, as time goes on.
Okay, that's a really solid advice in a sense. I know for a while you were a software engineer analyst at Goldman Sachs. Again, this is like the first internship, first role goal for, I know, at least a lot of my friends in their senior year right now doing their applications. Why was that the first experience that you chose to have? Like, what was your expectation going in, and what was the reality you saw when you got there?
Yeah, look, I think when I was looking for the internship, I did interview with a bunch of different organizations, including consulting organizations and startup organizations, or consulting startup organizations, I would say, and also engineering organizations. I eventually landed with Goldman, primarily because of two reasons, I think. One was the people I met were just amazingly talented. And back in the time when I was joining Goldman, it also was one of the biggest hubs of software technology on the street, and especially on the East Coast, especially if you didn't want to go on the West Coast. Um, so, a lot of talented people that I met in the interview. And then the second thing was some of the projects that they talked about were just very exciting, from the sophistication of it. So yeah, it seemed like a good fit. I would say I didn't really spend a lot of cycles debating it. uh, it was, yeah, it seems like a good experience. Let me go and actually have it. It was a fun interview process, a lot of talented people, a lot of interesting projects, and it was a very fast decision. So, yeah, I would say in hindsight, it's a lot more, deliberation that tends to happen. But I think at the moment, I wasn't deliberating as much.
What do you think was the most shocking part for you? This may not be, even your first role, but your second or third role even. But what do you think was the most shocking part for you? Making that transition between student to, someone who's working full time on the job and so on. Or did anything shock you? Were you like, I'm so prepared, I'm relaxed in a sense?
No, no, I think I was certainly there was certainly a transition that happened, and probably I would say the biggest revelation, or I would say the biggest learning curve I had, was being an entrepreneur.
Mm.
Um, right, I spent a couple of years at Goldman. I ended up learning quite a bit of algorithmic development and science around how to approach things. Now we call that AI or machine learning. Earlier, before AI and terminology but even before that, right, there was more of algorithmic development that was happening. And we were still trying to figure out how to use algorithms to actually create a science behind a lot of the business processes. And though we weren't calling it AI and I'm not calling it machine learning, but that experience, I was learning quite a bit at Goldman. And then when I went to kind of started my own company, it really brought just an amazing amount of experience. And I think the biggest, to your point, to your question, like what was the biggest thing I felt, was probably the stark difference between a large corporation and a startup. In a large corporation, you're typically tuned for a very depth experience. So if you're going to go deep into, let's say, algorithm development, you're going to go very deep. You're probably not going to have any sense of any other portion of the business there, right?
You
Whether
just do
that's,
that one role,
you
yeah.
do that one role at a very, very rapid clip, at a very deep clip, and you learn a lot. But you will not, of course, be understand marketing, or you won't understand sales, and
Mhm.
you're certainly not going to understand other portions of the technology areas, maybe even, and so on. And when I was obviously doing the startup, I was the CTO and the CMO and the CSO and the CRO, and you can name it, right? And so, and even IT person going and buying the computers and hooking up the network myself, and so on. So just the amount of the knowledge you end up gaining is just amazing. And I think the biggest jump or the biggest revelation was that the breadth that comes with the learning process is, there's always a debate about, is it better to go deep or is it better to go broad? And I
Mm.
think there is value in both, but especially initially in your career, actually getting that breadth portion is super useful, because it really did help me, I think, transitioning to multiple roles, looking at the business from different lenses, and so on and so forth. So I don't know if I totally answered your question, but I would say that was probably the biggest insight I had out of my career early on in that process.
No, I think you answered it very, very well. And moving into that startup phase of your life in a sense. So I'm an entrepreneur myself, and I think at times I completely understand. It's a little different. You can put whatever you want on the business card, but at the end of the day, you are the tea lady. You are you're a person running the company. You are the person doing all of those different roles in a sense. And at the same time, there is no like management training program. You are the startup. You have to run everything in a sense. So it's a lot of trial by fire in a sense. So how did you first kind of what made you curious to even join this or kind of co-found this team? And of course, I heard that it was even VC backed. You got lots of support in that initial stages and all of that. So what was kind of the motivation between beginning that entrepreneurial journey, and as you were going through all these different experiences and getting this kind of breadth of kind of learning with it, what do you think was the most important takeaway from all of that that later helped you in your career that you didn't realize at that point?
So, I mean, the motivation for the startup was that, my main piece or insight that I had very early in my career was that um, this thing that we were calling as AI today that area or that science, whether that's called AI, machine learning, algorithm development, would fundamentally change everything that we are working on in a business. And so, as I was working through in Goldman, one of the areas that it occurred to me is that um, why not just use the science only in the financial sector, but why not take that science into things that, for example, retailers are doing? Like retailers are trying to maximize their margins, their very thin margins. They're putting merchandise in stores. They're trying to create pricing for the stores, but they all do that at least back in the early 2000s in a very much as an art, right? There are people in the company who were called merchandisers, and they would figure out what price they want to put some merchandise at, and then they would price it, and then they would make some money out of it, and billions of dollars of allocation potentially, and hundreds of millions of dollars of profits or hundreds of millions of losses that would happen. And then so the thought was, well, if we can do this for larger things in financial sector, why couldn't we do that for retail? And so kind of my motivation was, can we start using algorithms and algorithm development and science to predict what's the best way to do this? And so that was kind of the motivation. And I would say that motivation has remained consistent with my career, whether I worked in a small company or a large company, is to kind of see how really to use um, the artificial intelligence or algorithm development or machine learning, again, whichever word suits your palette, you can use it. But how to really use that to innovate and disrupt the business that are in progression. And so even in the future, though I move between small companies and large companies, my focus has been in creating new businesses in those companies, focus on disruption using those technologies.
No, that is very fascinating, and you obviously hit the nail like on the head, and like caught the curve before it happened, in a sense, even with all of the things that we see now with everyone being obsessed with it. At that point in time, I know you went to another startup after that, that was acquired by Oracle, and you really had kind of this whole entrepreneur journey. You were part of the team. You really started going there.
Yeah.
What was it like, in those early stages when there wasn't much awareness about these topics, in a sense? So part of, especially in any startup, whether you're part of it, whether you founded it, or even, when it's being acquired, there's a certain amount of kind of educating the general public that needs to come with it, or at least, when you're communicating with people. So like, as I said, now people are very excited about it. People see it, in a sense. But at that point in time, I'm sure people are like, but why don't we do it like, the way we've always done it, in a sense, as you said. There was a different culture to many of the things that was happening. So how
Yeah.
did you go about kind of communicating this, or even to the point of, the next startup you had getting acquired? How did you kind of, I wouldn't even say brand yourself, but just position yourself as an organization, as a small company at that point in time that was growing, to get the intention, to get people to take what you were doing seriously?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question, and I think it comes down to that you cannot lead with technology. You need to lead with a customer point of view. You need to lead with the eventual outcome that you're trying to drive to, right? And of course, technology eventually will be the motivator around, or the mechanism through which you may be able to achieve that. So, I think just to take back that example there, we wouldn't really go into conversations with the customers or partners that we would be in and say, okay, like we have the latest and the greatest AI tool, or at the time, algorithms, that we have that we want to show you, that we wouldn't start there. We would actually talk about, hey, if you actually incorporated this, you know, you would see this improvement in the margins of the business. The margins were so dramatic, right? This wasn't like, okay, we got you like, a small change or the needle. Like the movement was so dramatic that people understood, okay, this is really going to save the bottom line or the top line of the revenue dramatically. And then yes, they get interested in the depth of the details around how it's happening. But like it's the flip of it, right? It's like you actually make sure that they understand the reason, or the outcome is very, very clear. And so, obviously, if you go and talk about, AI today, most people are kind of understand that. And, obviously that has been a journey over a period of years. And in fact, AI itself has been, multi-decade in work in process, right? This hasn't happened in a day, right? So, So, but and there has always been a spectrum of people which have either been very educated about it or not. But regardless, I think as long as you use a customer focused conversation to bring the point of view around why you need to do something in particular, that really lands very well.
I love that. I think it's a point of view that many tech people like can sometimes not exactly communicate as well, because they just like love. And I think I'm guilty of this as well. You fall in love with the problem or like with the solution instead of the problem. They say
Yeah.
there you're so proud of, okay, I figured this out. I have this technology. I have this this methodology of doing things, that we forget about the way we communicate it is also important. So I love that you brought that up in a sense. What do you think was your biggest lesson in a sense in those startup phases of, or that startup phase that you were going through in a sense, and also during that acquisition process? Because as you said, big companies and small companies have very different culture, and then you went from transitioning from a big company to a startup, and then eventually I think the startup, as I mentioned, was acquired, and you stayed on at Oracle as well. So how was it like kind of transitioning into an organization that again, probably has a different culture, probably has a different way of doing things? How did you as an employee make sure that you still stand out and thrive, admit, kind of like in the midst of all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is true that organizational sizes and different organizations have very different culture, and so I mean, I would say that what I've noticed in my career is that there are people that work really well in certain stages of maturity of a business. Okay, so there you will find that there are people who are excellent in taking a product from idea to starting starting a idea. Then there are certain people that work really well from taking an idea to, let's say, the first $1 million in revenue. Then there are some people that work really well taking that 1 to 10, and then there are certain people that work really well from 10 to 100. There are not a lot of people I've encountered that work well in all stages. Okay, so it's very hard. I'm not saying there aren't people like that, but it's not typical to find people where somebody who scales a business or is an expert in scaling a business where a product's already established is also the best person to go and incubate a business, or vice versa. Okay, so it's tricky because each of these stages of a business tend to have very different constraints and very different um, needs and expertise and skills needed, and the skills needed for those tend to change, and no one is an expert in everything, right? And so most people are geared for certain portions of the business. Now, personally for me, I find that I work best in the place where it's going from scratch to, let's say, a mid-sized business. When the time comes for the business to fully go to full scale, right? I hand it off and I move to my next thought or next idea. So how to start a new business, a new product, how to take it from incubation, how to take it all the way to where there is a thriving product. Maybe it's not like a humongous business, but there's a lot of customers, a lot of partners, and then it comes a point where the machine has to be rinsed and repeated so that you can get to a scale which is very, very large. Typically, like I go off. So when you talk about like moving from startups to Oracle, or things like that, it's not so much the question of the differences in those organizations. There's certainly some difference in the culture, but more importantly, the issue is, are you in a particular role where your expertise is going to be best used, and you are enjoying that phase there dramatically? So without necessarily commenting on my point, phase in Oracle, I would say, or how much I liked or not, I would say that's the way I would view these transitions. And in some instances, I found that when you go from one organization to another, you are in an instance like that. For the most part, those have been my gigs, and there that has not been true. I've typically left that in a earnest to go and find my next big thing that I want to do, I would say.
No, but that I think that really, answers my question better than I could expect in a sense. I think it really outlines, that how do you find where you have the most synergy with your role in a sense, and it kind of outlines that well. For a lot of, people who are still trying to figure that out in a sense, how did you figure out where you were best at? Did you just naturally see yourself, have more joy or more higher performance in those stages? What was the process of kind of like going through it, and what were kind of the markers that you kind of saw in your own career that made you go, maybe I'm at this kind of level, or for this to this stage in a sense, that's where my strengths lie. How did you kind of identify that?
Yeah, I mean that's hard. In a way, only time will help you figure this out. I think, but I think one thing is that I do think is important for people to understand is like, obviously, if you can be passionate about a strength that you have that you can execute on, that's the place to be versus being passionate on a weakness you may have. Let's say, right? So if you're not the best in a particular area, but let's say that is your passion, it's unlikely you're going to be like until you really move that from a weakness to your strength portion, it's unlikely you just based on passion you can be world class at that thing, right? You need a strength and a passion kind of coming together to kind of make that happen. And so what is your strength is a little hard to figure out, obviously, until you've had some experiences and have you tried things and have actually almost competed in that area with, let's say, broadly speaking. So you need a little bit of a track record to understand that. But once you do, and if you understand that is a strength of yours and you understand that is a passion of yours, then actually double downing on that area versus trying to, let's say, improve on a weakness. I mean, you can, of course, every weakness should be improved on, but the point is like improving on a weakness until it can become world class is unlikely to make you like a rock star in that particular area. So you are better off if you can actually be passionate about a strength that comes naturally to you. And at least for me, I think one thing was very clear to me, um, maybe a few years into my career, was that my ability to both be passionate about an area that's a new area, that's incubating area, that's maybe disruptive in nature, um, is a lot stronger than rinsing and repeating something somebody else has figured out already. But like there's a lot of value in doing that too, by the way. I don't want to trivialize that problem, but it's different skills and it is different points of views that are needed. And for me it was kind of fresh scratch plate was a better plate to be at than, let's say, something where the plate's already set for me.
No, I think, as I said, that's very good practical advice of, being able to do that. How do you know when it's time to transition into something new, into a new role in a sense? I know your next role is at a very large tech company, a household name, like after, Oracle and so on. So how did you decide, like, okay, it's time for me to find my new adventure or my new thing that I want to work on in a sense, and kind of, at least for you, you've been very good at kind of like, I wouldn't even say predicting what the future curve of technology is, but kind of staying on the line of, what today we know, data, technology, like machine learning, was is now kind of taking over the world. So how did you kind of craft your career and make sure that the next step you took was personally aligned, but also aligned with kind of the larger industry?
um I think um you certainly need a little bit of a um, ability to trend out things, right? So uh, obviously if you um, are waiting for the trend to fully materialize, then it's always almost always too late, right? So you are never able to capture the curve if you are not able to do those somewhat of a prediction in a way of the trend where the trend is happening. And so a little bit of that has been, I would say, um, luck, but also I think it's also related to understanding a particular domain deep enough to understand the implications of it and the rate of change for it and so on and so forth. So I think Penn um, prepares its alumni really well, I think, in terms of thinking about these kind of things. And so I certainly had a good framework in my mind when I was looking at and analyzing opportunities or analyzing products. And when we are looking at especially in new products and new product development, I mean, looking at those and looking at like these curves and where we are seeing adoption, where we are not seeing adoption, where we think the adoption might happen, or how viral the adoption could happen. Being able to be very analytical around it and being very data driven about it. But also, you have to understand that not everything shows up in the data, because trends typically are not super out there until they happen. And so no one, like it's commonly, for product development, it's commonly said, right, when Ford came out with a car, I'm sure he didn't go around asking customers, what do you want, and they said car. They wouldn't have said car, because he said a faster horse and buggy, right? And he of course still did a car. And so, like, those kind of things, you really have, there's, again, data driven is one thing, but like you really have at some point to think about disruption in a very analytical way, and then pursue those things. And sometimes you're lucky and you're on the right track, and sometimes it may not be the right track, but that's the fun of the game, I think, as well.
No, uh, I think, as you said, you you can kind of just predict the, like, and it's an AI and a machine learning kind of question as well. You can predict based on the data you have, right? But beyond that, it's a little hard to see in a way. So for all of us, winding down this conversation, for all of us now in the position that we have to kind of predict, okay, as you said, what do we want to do next? What do we want to do? Some people are asking for the rest of their life. I think it's a bit too much commitment for me. But what's the first step? What's the journey next after graduation, or even in figuring out what we want to do? There is a tendency, I feel, to just focus and go into what is exciting and what is interesting now, versus taking time to explore what personally interests us. I call it, it's kind of like I used to say it's like the bubble tea effect, where, like there was a time where bubble tea was like so exciting, and like the latest thing that, in at least the street that I lived in back at home in Malaysia, there'd be like 5 new shops. And then, when that trend was over and a new trend came, all 5 shops would close down and 5 new shops of that trend would kind of open up. And I feel like there's a tendency to do that, where, for a while, when the industry is focused on this, people are very excited about that. But for those of us at the moment where we're making big career decisions, is that really the best way to go? Or how do we kind of navigate and kind of filter out the noise and find out what are we passionate about versus, what is just exciting and happening now? You obviously, as I said, called it well. So how can we call it like you call it, in a sense?
So yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned most of the things already. I mean, passion, you can't be looking at what's in trend today, because in a way, I mean, I'm not talking in any specific thing, but like in whatever field or whatever domain you're in, there's always something that will be trending, right? Whether that is technology or finance or medicine or whatever, right? And I think if you are looking at that to make a decision, it's like saying in the stock market, right? You're making a decision on buying a stock because it's been climbing. Past does not predict futures, right? So again, it's like one of those things where you would expect to analyze, look at your own strengths, look at your own passion, look at what you want to spend time doing. And then, yes, of course, if in the realm of those things, then you trend out something and say, hey, I really think if I was in this domain, I'm really excited about it. This is a strength of mine. I think this is where the things are going to be heading. Sure, that's all fine. But I mean, of course, it's in the framework of your individual passion and strengths that I think that decision should be made in.
Okay. I like that note. And to kind of end this off, you are in a field of, data, AI, all the big things, which I personally know a lot of people who are genuinely very passionate about it, scarily so at times. Um, what are, the skills, the things that people interested in going into this field should know about? Or what are some of the experiences that you had that was beneficial for the current landscape and the current kind of climate, of what's happening in the tech world? So what helped you? What do you recommend we do to get those similar experiences?
Asha, you broke up for me a little bit. Can you just repeat?
All right, sorry, but essentially, for all of those interested in the kind of tech, data, AI space, what were the skills that you found, or the experiences that you found were most relevant to you and that really helped you thrive? And what recommended experiences and skills would the rest of us need to kind of find, so that if we are interested in this field, we can excel in it as well.
I think the biggest one is problem solving. So I think the more analytical and problem solving capabilities you have, obviously, that requires a strong foundation of, maths and STEM and sciences generally. So I feel that that's really the core of the skills that really help. I mean, of course, there may be very specific skills you may learn, or like programming languages and all of that. It's all fine, but really things change at a very rapid clip. So I mean, anything you learn is probably going to be, obsolete in a few years anyhow. So at the end of the day, it's all about problem solving and analyzing, and using your experiences to inform that. And so the better you can get at any kind of problem solving, I would say that's kind of the key skill. And the more you have an ability to take a very large and a complex problem and be able to break it in a way that you can then actually understand that problem better, and then be able to then actually solve that problem as well. And the more you can do that in a very systematic way, I would say is the thing that I found most useful in all the trainings that I got at Penn or earlier as well.
All right. Problem solving. Okay. And that's something you learn, kind of through solving actual problems as much as, at Penn and so on. So final words of wisdom for our audience before we end for today.
I think, again, maybe the thing that I have always looked in my career has been do something that you enjoy, do something that you're passionate about, and then focus on your strengths and making your strengths like your super strengths. And I think that tends to bear well typically if you follow that.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much for being on the show. We had so much fun talking to you, so I hope that you had as much fun sharing your experiences as the audience listening to it, and appreciate you taking the time out to actually impart some I would say wisdom to our humble undergrad brains. So appreciate it.
It was fun talking to you, Arshan. I'm super happy that I'm able to offer some insights for the Penn students.
All right. And to all our audience watching, this has been Changing Reality. Thank you once again for tuning in, and we'll see you again next week. Bye.
Bye.
You're listening to Changing Reality. Changing Reality, where we bend reality all across the world. Only on WQHS Radio.